it's all different. Well, good evening, everybody. And thank you for coming along. And I have to say it is probably with some relief that I see we have a slightly more limited chamber tonight. And hopefully it will last that way. But who knows? Anyway, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we live, work and play. We pay our respects to elders, past, present and emerging, and recognise their continued connection to these lands and waterways. We acknowledge our shared responsibility to care for and protect our place and people. So welcome to those community members that have joined us via the webcast and also those in the public gallery for the 24th of January 2022 Central Coast Council Public Forum. And I will now declare that forum open. You will also note, just as I'm noticing, we've got some new technology here, so I'm crossing my fingers as well, that will also proceed without any difficulties. The forum is being held today basically to hear from community members who have registered to speak on items before the council meeting tonight. So I ask that the gallery listens in respect to those people, and where the speakers are commenting on a document proposed to be exhibited for community submissions, I do need to remind them that they must also make their submission separately once the exhibition opens. Also, I'd like to remind you, of course, that it is indeed being webcast, and this means that your image and what you say is recorded. And of course, that can lead to defamation, so please be careful about what you say, and also keep your phones off, because it can actually interfere with the technology. First of all, I guess I need to ask the staff, do you have any conflicts of interest here? I'm pretty sure there isn't, so we'll record that. And just for speakers, just to remind you that your presentation is live streamed and recorded, and you have 3 minutes. And I think you will see on the clock, you will be able to see up there how you're going. And I might give you a few seconds of latitude, but by and large, we need to be fairly rigorous about that. And I note that we have 3 speakers tonight. And the first speaker is on item 2.3, Zina Harish. Zina, welcome. And hopefully I got your name right. Did I get close to it? Thank you.
A lot better than my schooling career, I'd say. Thank you, Mr. Administrator, for allowing me to speak on this item today. I'm asking that you vote against the staff recommendation for sale of this land. There's a few reasons, but I request that you do follow the option 3 that was provided in the document, which is that it's maintained in council and community hands, and that council seek options for third-party leasing arrangements, favouring educational and training purposes. With the amount of parcels that have been provided within all of the asset sales tranche listings, for me it's absurd for staff to consider that this site was not a contentious one. I visited it today for the first time in 12 years. I was there myself 12 years ago as a trainee for council. I believe most community members probably wouldn't know the site existed unless they were being trained through council means. So in terms of that, it's even by chance that I'm available to come here and speak to you today on this matter in the first instance. So after visiting today, it's very beautiful. Yeah, there's no trees on it, but it's a well-maintained facility. Clearly, council have invested funds since I was there 12 years ago to upgrade the car park and provide fencing. So, in terms of that, I feel that, council should at least maintain this until we have some elected representatives to consider whether or not we should sell it, and maybe consider some third-party leasing options. I can now use this spare time to go into further about the asset sales if you would like, but I feel I've made my point in this particular item.
Right. Well, thank you for that. And when the paper comes up, I'll ask Dr. Howe just to try and respond to some of your comments.
Sure.
So thank you for that. We'll now move to the second speaker, Mr. Kevin Brooks, 2.5, update to council expenses and facilities policy. Welcome once again. Good to see you again, Kevin.
See you, Rick. First question, what is the purpose of these amendments? The only material changes appear to concern the administrator. Both Council and OLG have previously confirmed in writing that the administrator is already bound by the current policy, itself approved during the current period of administration. So if the current policy already applies to the administrator, why do we need a new one? The new clause 5 sets out maximum amounts council will pay for expenses. With respect to the administrator, however, the maximum amount column merely contains waffle about the appointment rather than any actual maximum amounts. Council should clarify this new wording and confirm it is not intended to change the maximums payable to the administrator as set out in the current policy. Council should also clarify why the new draft removes the statement Council will not pay expenses not explicitly addressed in the policy. Turning to current clause 82, an opportunity has been missed to end the current practice whereby the CEO and the administrator approve one another's expenses, a practice generally frowned upon by ICAC. There are other options available, for example, approval of administrator expenses by the independent chair of the ARIC. It would also be helpful, given Council no longer considers Wyong to be the administrator's normal headquarters, if Council were to explain precisely where his normal headquarters are located. This is significant because clause 32 of the policy only allows meals and accommodation to be paid when undertaking approved travel away from a normal headquarters location. The policy should also confirm how the administrator's expenses are governed by the Crown Employee Award. This is too complex to explain the time given to me tonight, but Council has previously indicated Award Clause 26.3 is relevant, limiting overnight stays to 3-star accommodation. Council acknowledged this when it stated in writing that the previous administrator only stayed in 5-star Cowinda waters because 3-star accommodation was unavailable. Award Clause 26.6, meanwhile, states that expenses must be properly and reasonably incurred. This suggests a reasonable test, most likely made against the award Part B table of monetary rates, and indeed the reference to 3-star accommodation in Clause 26.3. Any legal reasonableness test will be undertaken externally, but there is also a community reasonableness test. So I'd like to end by asking the administrator how he justifies spending $27,500 on meals and accommodation in just 6 months, more than 3.5 times what he incurred in the previous 6 months. Staying overnight in Wyong despite council car and free petrol, when ratepayers must pay their own commuting costs when working in Sydney. Is this another example of rate hikes benefiting council bureaucracy more than the local community?
Thank you. And our third speaker is Mark Snell, speaking on item 2.11 on the meeting record of Protection of the Environmental Trust Management Committee meeting held on the 12th of December. Welcome again, Mark. Good to see you again, 2 days in a row.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to ask Council to seek a further report about recommendations 2 and 3 so that you're more informed before making a decision about it. There does not appear to be any particular urgency for a decision. In your media release of March last year, inviting participation in the consultation about Umina coastal sandplain woodland, you said that this bushland was unique and worthy of protection. I invite locals to share your thoughts on the management of these areas, you said. The community would expect that these thoughts are taken into consideration within the council report that recommends related spending. That normally happens. However, that feedback is not in this agenda item. In this 13-page submission from the Peninsula Residents Association, it suggested a concerted collaborative effort was needed to protect the very small extent of UCSW, which is held in disparate ownership. It suggested that the money held in trust by council would be more effective by combining resources with others. There are also other aspects of this agenda report that leave questions unanswered. For example, the requested amounts do not correspond with the amounts listed in the budget provided during committee minutes. Neither the report nor the committee minutes provide overall objectives, a management strategy, or even a projected plan for each site detailing expected achievements and outcomes for the project. The proposed 10-year spending plan does not appear to follow the recommended priorities of the Office of Heritage and Environment. Their strategy lists council-managed land near Woy Woy Station as top priority. This agenda report does not explain why the committee is not following these recommendations. While the tasks listed might correspond to some of the recommended actions, their effectiveness can only be measured by their place in the overall plan. I was surprised to note that the budget task list puts management plans at years 5 and 10 in this project. Council expects residents to provide their plans in great detail before building a house, not 5 or 10 years later. And I would say for good reason. Finally, I would draw your attention to the fact that this item was submitted by the governance section of Council and mentions a governance goal. That goal is what we are wanting, particularly transparency, respect and use of community participation, and most importantly, great partnerships. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mark. Again, I'll probably ask Dr. Howe just to make one or two comments on your thoughts. We don't have any more speakers, so for now we will close the public forum, and I now declare that closed. And if you hopefully either attend in person or you can watch it again on the broadcast website, which will commence at 6:30. So thank you, and we'll see you then.
I'm Ace Buchan. I'm a professional surfer from the Central Coast. Growing up on the Central Coast was a dream for a young kid that loved the ocean as much as I did and had this amazing playground to go and explore, to kind of have the chance to wake up and, you know, watch the sunrise, pre-dawn light kind of turn into those beautiful blue and pink hues. Nature, you know, in the way that it was kind of intended is really special. You know, the beaches and the space that we have on the Central Coast has given me a lot of clarity, and it's kept me grounded. It's kept my keel upright when things have gone a little bit crazy in my life, and being able to glide along the face of a moving piece of ocean that's been generated hundreds of thousands of miles away, it's a feeling like no other. One of the things I really love about the Central Coast is that there are these beautiful kind of swathes of land that have been declared national parks, and as a child I was lucky enough to start experiencing that with my parents. To now go and do that with my kids is really special. Being able to kind of walk through the bush and not see anyone else and just kind of listen to the sounds and, you know, sometimes just drop the surfboards and go exploring, I feel pretty lucky to have access to. For tens of thousands of years, people have inhabited this land and looked after it and cared for it, and we need to respect this beautiful playground that we've been lucky enough to call home. It's something pretty special.
The Community Strategic Plan is the community's vision for the Central Coast for the next 10 years. It's called One Central Coast because this is the first plan for the whole of the Central Coast. We are one region, one council and one community. We live in a special place here on the coast, one in which we want all members of our community to feel valued and have access to a range of opportunities to participate in the richness of community life. And every one of us can play a part in bringing this community vision to life.
If people feel part of a community in some way, they'll give without probably even knowing they're doing it.
I wanted to restore this building and get it back to what it was. It was the jewel of the crown, and I wanted to get it back to that. Making a difference. I guess that's what we're really here for.
The smile on the faces when they see these engines and that bus coming around, they just love it.
If you're following what makes you happy and excited and interested, then you're definitely going to live a life that you will be thankful to have lived.
At the end of the day, we just had a good idea. We needed the support of many people to turn that great idea into a sustainable venture. My name's Tim Silverwood. I grew up on the Central Coast. It wasn't until I got a bit older and started travelling around the world, I realised that what we had was so special because people don't always treat the environment as well as we do here on the Central Coast. Our programs have focused on going into schools and running events in communities. We also have a huge global online audience. One man cannot solve these big global problems. It's going to take a tribe of people coming together to solve them. It's a really amazing and rewarding journey in spreading this message around the world.
I've always been on the coast and I've loved the coast. About 6 years ago, I bought the Chapman building. I got the opportunity, I saw that it was for sale and I stood back on the car park up there and a village central and I looked down and, you know, I could just feel this was the place to be. I could just see what the town was. There's always these little niches that are, you know, going back and forth and, you know, I guess it's an obsession for all of us because we saw what Wyong was like and it's getting it to a place where, you know, we're proud to say, we're from Wyong. Like it's become a real proud place to be.
My name's Chris Wallace. Myself and my wife, we own Community Fire Education and the Fun Engine. We educate the community in a different way. We teach people what to do in case of fire. One of the biggest things is our education bus. What we do, we go out to different fates, festivals, wherever we can go. When we do the bus sometimes, we get 2,000 through that bus. I just enjoy communicating and getting out there and just educating in a different way.
I'm Meredith Gilmore. I've lived on the coast since 2000, originally from Sydney. Chose the coast because it's close to Sydney, but it's got that more laid back kind of thing that I like. I like living in regional areas. I started visual art in my 40s. It's just so different from what I ever thought that I'd ever do, and it is what led me into thinking it would be great to talk to people in the arts on the radio. So I started doing some shows, particularly a program called Coast Arts, which was a new show, and I reached out into the community because I'm an artist as well. And I just felt like there was a lot of scope on the radio to do interviews with artists and poets and writers, and that's been going now for over 7 years.
My name is Shauna O'Brien. I am from the Central Coast of New South Wales on Dark and Young land, and I'm a dancer. As an Indigenous dancer, we're very inspired by the environment and where we come from, all of the trees, the way that they curve around all of the rocks and the sea faces, the beautiful water, the fresh air, and that plays a huge part in the creative process. I was lucky enough to study at NASA Dance College, which was a super incredible experience, and the facilities, the studios are really beautiful, the staff are incredible, and I feel very privileged to have had that opportunity. Through volunteering, I was able to meet a bunch of really great other young people in the community that are really passionate about helping other people, and that's a way of taking something that I'm very passionate about and sharing that with other people. No matter where I go to work or if I have to spend a lot of time in Sydney, I always come back to the Central Coast because it feels like home and it helps rejuvenate me.
One of the things about the Central Coast I've noticed as well, which is people are so helpful to each other. They collaborate, they are interested in going to each other's exhibitions, not just to see what people are doing, but so that there are people there, and you've got to be competitive, but you don't have to always be competitive with each other.
If you're in a position to make a difference, I guess you're obliged to make that difference, really. Just happy to, you know, give it all I could, and it became, you know, a local icon and a buzzing place to be.
Well, once again, good evening, everybody. And again, the beginning of the formal meeting of Central Coast Council, I will acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we live, work and play, pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and recognise their continued connection to these lands and waterways. We acknowledge our shared responsibility to care for and protect our place and people. I will now declare the meeting open. Just again, a reminder that it is being webcast and that you should avoid making any statements or calling out any comments that might be deemed to be defamatory. I just want to say at the beginning of the year, I guess, that it's a big welcome to everybody and those watching at home. And I hope everybody's been able to get a bit of a break during this period and enjoyed some form of summer at least. Because the lead up to Christmas wasn't all that good. For those who might recall, unfortunately, I had to do the December meeting literally from home because I had 2 days prior to it tested positive for COVID. And I have to say, for those who haven't had it, you really don't want to get it because despite the antivirals and everything else, I'm still feeling the effects. And interestingly, last night, I happened to be with Gordon Reid at the Citizen of the Year Awards over at the Art House, and talking to Gordon, he had had COVID well before me, and he is still suffering precisely exactly the same symptoms. So coming from a doctor, I actually felt somewhat comforted that it wasn't just me. Anyway, that's in the past. I do want to acknowledge today, with great sadness, the Council was advised last week on the passing of John Dawson, who was a former General Manager of the Wyong Shire Council. John was in fact the Shire Council's longest servicing General Manager. He actually commenced on the 15th of May 1973 as the Shire Clerk before being appointed to the role of General Manager on 1st of July 1993. And John held that role until the 30th of September 2003, which is a period of more than 30 years, and by my calculations, that's more than 50 years in local government, which I think he started at the age of 15, and whilst he did spend some time at other councils, he really spent a major part of his time up here on the coast. And he took out and led the council to 2 A.R. Blewett Memorial Awards, which were presented to the Shire Council under his stewardship. Now, to achieve those awards, it is some effort, as some of us know who've been through that process, but it is a massive effort and really a testament to the way he was obviously managing things to be able to achieve 2. So I do want to actually pay my respects to him and my condolences to his wife, Julie, his children and his broader friends and family at this time. The Australia Day Award winners. I want to congratulate the winners and nominees at last night's 2023 Australia Day Awards ceremony. Over 50 nominations were received with a very high standard of nominees acknowledged. It was a fantastic atmosphere at the awards last night, and I particularly enjoyed the many discussions I had both with nominees and community members present. And one of the key things that pretty much all said, it's not about winning or losing, just to be present here and hearing what our peers and what our friends and others do in other groups is reward enough. And I thought that was a really nice way that several people expressed what the awards were all about. So congratulations to the winners of all of the categories and to Mr. Ryan Wilson, who took out the prestigious Citizen of the Year Award. Now, Ryan is a tradesperson who founded the Free Trade Day, and it's a program which helps locals, obviously free, in providing support with simple trade work. And he's got over 300 people, or volunteers if you like, now working for that particular project. I think that's an amazing achievement. And clearly a lot of particularly elderly people and people who live alone, I'm sure will value that volunteer service amazingly. But every award winner and nominee was a true embodiment of that community spirit that exists up here on the Central Coast. This year, I'm sort of looking forward to extending my community engagement across the coast, and I'll be attending many of the council events throughout the year. As a kick-off to that, from 5 to 7 p.m. this Tuesday, I'll be down at the Leagues Club Park in Gosford for Council's Australia Day community event. and I invite interested community members to attend this free afternoon event and come by the Central Coast Council tent and have a chat. We will actually have people from customer service there who will have laptops and will actually be able to go into some of our databases and be able to hopefully resolve some questions and queries literally on the spot. Anyway, it'd be great just if we can see people there. I enjoy having these conversations. I like hearing people what they have to say, and I just would ask people to keep looking at the Your Voice, Our Coast, which is our website where the engagement projects are run out of, and just look for what's up and please participate. And some of the projects that are going at the present point of time are the Tuggerah Lakes Rehabilitation Works, which is looking at the environmental management of the lakes and estuaries. Our Coast, Our Waterways, which is looking at how we manage and use our waterways. The Draft Plan of Management of Community Land, of which there is some interest in, which seeks feedback on how Council manages its vast array, which is over 2,000 parcels of community land from natural areas, sports grounds, parks, cultural sites and general community use spaces. And there's also, as one of our, I think, residents pointed out tonight, the Woy Woy Peninsula Floodplain Risk Management Study and Plan, which is building on the first phase of community engagement from 2021 and seeks feedback on the draft study and plan. Just a couple of updates. Some people go through Gosford all the time. We'll have seen that the Gosford Public Wharf has been cleared and the essential maintenance and safety work is underway there, and that wharf will remain obviously closed while that work takes place. And it's really a reminder now about being safe on our road. Shouldn't have to say it, but of course we still get people out there who do break the law, and there is that major, hopefully, discouragement that the double demerit points will apply from Wednesday the 25th of January to Sunday the 29th of January inclusive. So don't say you weren't warned. Looking ahead to this year, there's a lot to look forward to. We have some major community events and festivals. We have major sporting events. The Matildas are going to be here, for example. We've got a very large capital works program, and Mr. Bolgoff tells me that that could be even larger than we've had previously. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. Hopefully most of them are renewal projects, and I think they are. But one of the things that I'm going to be focusing on, together with the CEO, is to continue to look at and improve our council service delivery and our productivity. The council and the community last year weathered some pretty significant challenges, and I'm confident the commitment that we've got inside the organisation to consolidating and improving its overall performance will ensure that we're able to better serve you, the Central Coast community, throughout 2023. I think with that, I'm going to conclude my comments for tonight, and we'll move into the meeting proper. So item 1.1 is disclosures of interest. I don't have any items to disclose. I don't believe anybody else has advised me. So with that, I shall resolve to adopt the resolution that is displayed on the screen. Item 1.2, which is confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting. Whilst I was away at home carrying out that meeting electronically, I can confirm that the minutes are correct, and therefore I'm happy to resolve to adopt the resolution confirming that those minutes that were held on the 13th of December 2022. Item 1.3, a notice of intention to deal with matters in confidential session. As is becoming pretty much our norm, there are no matters we are going to consider in a confidential session, so I will again resolve to adopt the resolution that we will note that there's no matters to be tabled to be dealt with in a closed session. So we move into the items proper, and the first one is the monthly finance report, which you will notice for November 2022, and I will ask the Chief Financial Officer and almost acting, he has been in a sense up till now, but I'll ask the CEO to go through it.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. This report is based on the November financials. You'll recall, or those close watchers of council will recall that the council meeting was reasonably early in December, and obviously the Christmas break has meant that we haven't been able to present the December financials to this meeting, which will be presented next month in February. So February we will see December and the January financials up. So these are the November financials. But they do show a continuation of the strong financial performance in line with our financial recovery plan that we've followed quite closely and have been quite successful in deploying. In short, our operating performance is running better than budget and slightly above our benchmark for operating performance ratio. And in fact, our operating performance ratio, that's our net profit percentage, is currently at 10.3% within our target band of 1.8%. Now, normally we'd start to think about how we're going to pull that back, but given we've got significant emergency loans to pay and we're seeking to repay down that debt, that's not a bad thing. This is in part one of the factors that would allow the accelerated repayment of the $100 million in emergency loans, which resets and will need to be refinanced in December of this year. Unrestricted cash is in a strong position with the exception of the water fund, which has a very small positive working funds balance. These limited working funds in water is why there's consideration of loans to allow the progressing of the Marty water treatment plant upgrade that's to be considered later in the agenda. Our capital works progress is improving with $54 million outlaid versus a budget of $57 million. Importantly, this is a significant improvement on our capital delivery versus the same point of last year. So we're roughly $17 million more advanced in delivering our capital works program than we were the same point last year. And I'm really pleased to see that improvement, and I'll be continuing to drive to make sure that we do deliver the works program that we set for ourselves. This month we also present the December investment report later in the agenda, but I'll talk to it now. Importantly, it shows a positive cash balance in all funds, and if you combine the drainage and general funds together, which will ultimately merge together in 2026. But again, as I mentioned above, for November, unrestricted funds balance in water is reasonably small. All our investments are held in approved deposit-taking institutions, essentially Australian banks, and approximately 32% of our holdings expire over the next 12 months, which allow council to take advantage of the higher interest rates available at the time. The balance of our investments expire reasonably evenly across the next 4 to 5 years. Thank you.
Now, thank you, Mr. Farmer. I have to say, from my point of view, going into the Christmas break this year after the previous two, despite the COVID situation, it is, in fact, the first time that, if you like, we weren't having to think about a plan B. The first one, of course, we would just source the emergency loans that the Chief Executive Officer mentioned, but we were then having to start embarking on heavily downsizing an organisation, starting to sell assets and do the other things. And I need to stress quite clearly, all of that program was set by the bank. It was not set by me or Mr. Person. That was the bank's criteria in order for us to receive that emergency $100 million of loan, which, as the Chief Executive pointed out, we'll have a chance to when we refinance, when that comes up for rollover, we will be able to repay substantive chunks of that. And at this point of time, our net debt is actually just over $300 million, which is below what this council started with when Mr. Person and I actually arrived here. I think the cash position that the Chief Executive outlined is first class. We have, even allowing for the deficit in the drainage fund, we still have over $100 million of working capital or unrestricted cash, which is a very healthy position, as the Chief Executive mentioned, and gives us options now to be considering to repay more of that debt and to actually reduce that debt down, particularly, both the CEO and I are hoping, before councillors come back, we hope to have that debt well down, if not eliminated, in order to free up for the new council to have that money that has been budgeted in the long-term financial plan for repayment of principal and interest, means that money will then be available for the council to decide what to do with an elected body, to decide what to do with it down the track. So that's what our plan is, and at the moment it's, I guess, going according to plan. So with that, I'm happy to support that, the November report, and agree to resolve to adopt the resolution that's shown on the screen. Item 2.2, which is consultation on the outcomes of the review of the councillor misconduct framework. I'm going to ask the Director of Corporate Services, Marissa Rakamallara, to actually, is she here? Marissa, to actually open that one up. Now, I know you've had a lot of experience in this, having worked with three councils in administration in recent times. Is that correct?
At least three.
At least three, there we go. Well experienced.
So at the moment, the Office of Local Government is undertaking a review into the councillor misconduct framework. It's been a process where they've released discussion papers and consulted with industry key stakeholders and the public. And they're at the stage where there's a series of 49 recommendations being put, with a real focus on the creation of independent panels to undertake reviews into allegations of misconduct. Council has the opportunity to provide feedback on those recommendations, and a draft submission is attached to the report. It is my view that in whole, the recommendations are supported as a positive move forward for governance of the sector, and there is additional detail in the attachment.
Thank you. Yes, I contributed to this review, and in fact, 3 of the current 4 administrators actually sat in a room whilst we actually contributed into this particular review. And I have to say, it's quite interesting. Those people who, or particularly those administrators who've been working with councils that have been through these processes of having been dismissed or sacked because of councillor behaviour, are very strong on the thoughts that there must be a separation, that there must be this independent entity set up to have the powers to do it. It is very, very difficult, as it's currently set up, for the CEO to manage those types of relationships when the CEO is the employee of those people who may be involved in misconduct at the council level. So that's why we're very strong about that particular change, and I'm hopeful that whichever government comes into power after the March election, they will pick up a number of the recommendations that are there. The second thing that we're very strong about is there needs to be some actual, if you like, powers that do penalise councils that do misbehave. They need to be financial, and they need to be seen to be, if you like, put down in front of their peers. So those are some of the key things that were looked there. Training was, of course, we believe is absolutely mandatory and needs to be recorded. And just a range of toughening it up, because unfortunately, whether we like it or not, this trend has been continuing of the misbehaviour of councillors over time. And you get various extremes of it. But when you see, and I think it's maybe just short of 50 odd CEOs have been terminated since the last election, which was a little over 12 months ago, and some of those are very good CEOs, you have to wonder how this is actually happening. It's just wrong. So therefore, I'm very strong, and as I have to say, my other colleagues who are administrators, and that's why I know Ms. Rakamallara, with her experience, will also seize very much these same issues that need to be addressed if we're going to have good governance out into the future. But with that, obviously the submission is there for those to see, and the actual original document that was produced by Gary, it's, we give the contact for that on the web. So with that, I'm just going to resolve to adopt the resolution to support that submission as shown on the screen. Item 2.3, which is the sale of council land at 9 Russell Drysdale Street, East Gosford. I'm going to ask Alice Howe, the Director responsible for that, and to try and also respond to some of Zena Harish's questions and comments. So hopefully you'll get some answers.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. 9 Russell Drysdale Street, East Gosford was originally included in the tranche 3 of Council's asset sales program resolved on the 27th of April 2021. In relation to Ms. Siraj's points, there were 3 submissions relating to that row, that area, 1 for this site and 2 for the adjoining site, which Council did subsequently resolve to sell as part of that tranche 3 program. Those submissions related to concerns about loss of parking at the time, and the council resolution reflected some constraints around the provision of parking when the Tranche 3 asset sale program came back to council. This particular site at 9 Russell Drysdale Street was temporarily removed from the sales program following an internal decision to retain it for staff training purposes on an interim basis. Staff training at the site is now being phased out and alternative training facilities are being utilised. As the site is surplus to council's requirements, it's recommended that it be sold for not less than the market value as determined by an independent valuer, and that the sale be by expression of interest, and that preference be given to potential purchasers that can commit to making use of the site for education and training related purposes. And this will allow the revenue from the site to be reinvested in the delivery of council services. Thank you, Mr. Administrator.
Thank you. And I have to say, your commentary, I think there clearly was some comments made, but at this point in time, I think I'm comfortable to still remain with the current decision, which is to move on with that. It did go through the process, and while I accept there were some comments made and so on, but I think the protection there is the fact that it is going to be kept in, if you like, an education precinct. I am aware of some other discussions that are going on, which of course I can't talk about yet until they come to fruition, but I'm confident, I'll put it this way, that it will remain as part of an education precinct, and therefore will add extreme value to that part of our patch. Also, as the Director mentioned, the results will go towards improving services and or debt. And that's the only two places where money goes from the moment, is from sale of any asset. It goes towards debt or it goes to improving services. It is not going into a new asset per se. With that, I'm going to support the recommendations and resolve to adopt those resolutions that are shown on the screen. Item 2.4, which is Metro Cinemas, rental concessions. Again, Dr. Howe, I'm going to ask you just to open that one up.
Thank you again, Mr. Administrator. The operator of the Lake Haven Cinema Complex has requested an extension of rent relief originally provided to meet council's obligations as a commercial landlord under COVID regulations. The current rent relief is in place until 31 January of this year, and while those COVID requirements ended some time ago, the operator has requested more time to return the cinema complex to self-sustaining commercial viability. In discussions with the operator late last year, a reduction in rent to 18% of turnover was requested, which is less than the current relief capped at 20% of turnover. Council officers have subsequently received a request last week after the business paper was finalised for no rent to be paid until the business returns to profitability. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Howe. Now, look, there's definitely a question as to whether one should be involved in this game or not. At this point in time, the council made the decisions in the past that they would be involved for no doubt good reasons. At this point in time, we are dealing with Metro Cinemas, and you'll notice that the council paper had a figure of 18% of turnover. There has been a request for a range of other measures that they would like us to look at. I'm not inclined to look at those measures, but I am prepared just to move it to a flat 15%, which was within the range of 15% of turnover, which is within the range that was originally set for a period of 12 months, and we'll see what happens at the end of that. But during that period, I think there's some thinking that has to go on about council's role in providing some services. So just to move that on and let the further period of hopefully 12 months go by and see how we go. I'll support the recommendation with the amendment which is shown on the screen to 15% as opposed to 18% in the papers. Item 2.5, the update to council expenses and facilities policy. I think Ms. Rakamanara, your item again, and hopefully we can just point out a couple of comments or answer some of the comments that Mr. Brooks made.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. And thank you, Mr. Brooks, for highlighting an opportunity for council to provide clarity and to the community in what is an unusual context for a council in New South Wales. So I'll respond to your questions and comments as well as provide a general introduction for the benefit of our community and audience here tonight. Under the Local Government Act, Council must develop and adopt a Council of Facilities and Expenses policy, which Central Coast Council did, and the most recent updates were considered in September and November 2020. As noted in the dictionary appended to the Act, any reference in the Act or in other statutory instruments to the Council specifically includes an administrator. So, as has been rightly asserted, the administrator is bound by the provisions of existing council policies, including the Facilities and Expenses policy, to the extent that the policy is consistent with legislation. Although the policy itself is silent on the matter of residential accommodation, as distinct from accommodation related to short-term travel for conferences and the like, it refers to the Crown employee's conditions of employment award. And this is applicable to the administrator in that the position is an appointee of the New South Wales Government. That award at section 26.12 includes provision for arrangements when a person is required to work from a temporary work location for greater than 35 days. This section does not include a reference to a star rating. The purpose of the draft policy presented to this meeting for further consultation is to make explicit that which is only implied in the current policy, and to ensure that any inconsistencies between the administrator's appointment, which is separate and different to the election of councillors, are properly reflected in the policy. It is not intended that any amendment will apply retrospectively. Indeed, the proposed amendments to the policy, if adopted, will not result in any changes to the facilities provided to the administrator. A number of other changes are proposed and are tabulated in the report, including the reason for the proposed amendment. There are a number of wording changes that are recommended to better align with the model policy, and a small number of clauses that are proposed to be removed to ensure the policy is easy to read and to apply. One example is a removal highlighted by tonight's speaker, being that council will not pay expenses not explicitly addressed in the policy. The table at clause 5 of the updated policy is an exhaustive list and is expressed as such. Further, section 252 subclause 3 of the Act provides in part that a council must not pay any expenses incurred otherwise than in accordance with the policy under this section. Accordingly, the current clause 23 is redundant. In response to Mr. Brooks's question regarding an increase in costs, a number of items factored into the quantum of change, being the timing of payments over a changing financial year, a change to public health orders in relation to the availability of face-to-face conferences, and the appropriate identification of categories of expenditure, especially the distinction between residential and travel-related accommodation. It is acknowledged that further clarity can be provided, and to this end, we will provide an updated report with a new format that provides greater clarity on categories of expenditure and comparative data that aligns with the standard financial year, including previous periods, to assist in identifying trends. In relation to the comment regarding the maximum amount payable under the administrator's contract, which is in the table under clause 5, I can state that the current contract provides for an annual salary of $320,000. The wording in the table allows for a payment to any future administrator in accordance with the terms of their own contract at that time, thus future-proofing the policy. It is worthwhile noting that the operational aspects of the policy that underpin its implementation are addressed by way of an internal procedure. The Speaker's views on Clause 82 are acknowledged, and the appropriate approval method will be considered during the consultation period. We have a number of options here and would like time to investigate the most appropriate one. The proposed amended policy provides the reasonable basis upon which the administrator is provided facilities and reimbursed for costs incurred in undertaking his duties in a manner that is consistent with legislation, industrial instruments, and ministerial proclamations. The purpose of tonight's report is to present the draft policy for public exhibition, and all submissions will be considered and presented in a future report to Council. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope that somewhat lengthy but very clear explanation of what goes on was helpful. I guess the summation out of that is very clear. My salary is $320,000 $1,000 per annum. That is the same number that the administrator got in 2016. So there has been no increase in the last 7 years, which I'm feeling very sorry about. I agree. Thank you for your sympathy. The other thing to note is the council has agreed to actually classify things in a more transparent way and show the data right from when I started right through to now, so you can see the comparative periods and everything else, so that it's very clear to everybody. So that will appear in the next council meeting, correct? So that'll be coming up in the February meeting. So it will be there, laid out in black and white, and pretty hard to go around. So with that, and just to note that it is going out on exhibition, so if you've got some thoughts as to how it can be improved, because it will be your councillors that this will apply to down the track, so you may want to think about it in that context. Is there anything you might wish to add or take out when you think that it will apply to a future council incoming in September 2024? So with those comments, I'm going to resolve to adopt the resolutions that are displayed on the screen for item 2.5. Item 2.6, which is pecuniary interest disclosure returns. This is standard procedure. Anytime there's new people who are required to do that, they must complete the pecuniary interest forms, and they must be tabled and received at council within 3 months. That has been done, and so I will just resolve to adopt those resolutions as shown on the screen. Item 2.7, which is the reappointment of the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee chairperson. The recommendation here is that the council reappoint Carl Millington as the chairperson. I've known Carl for some considerable time, and he is a very, very strong financial person. He is a partner in a medium-sized accountancy firm, and he is involved in audit. So he really does understand councils, audit and finances. And given the situation this council's been in, I think it's terribly important that we retain his services as continuity through to when a new council comes in with someone of that ilk. So I'm very happy to say that we're keen to extend him, and we will now extend him to complete which will make it a full 5-year term for him as chairperson, which will take him through to April 2025. So with that, I'm going to support the resolution and adopt it as shown on the screen. Item 2.8, which is minutes of the advisory group and committee meetings. These are standard things. There's a range of committee meetings that have been held, and there's no actions resulting from those minutes, but just for the record, there was the Water Management Advisory Committee meeting, there was the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee meeting, Protection of the Environment Trust Management Committee meeting, and Coastal Open Space System Advisory Committee. So all of those meetings have been held. Some of those minutes have yet to be confirmed at their next meetings, but council can note those minutes as they stand at this particular point in time. There are a number of committees that didn't have quorums, and therefore meetings were not actually held. We go to item 2.9, which is a recommendation on the Coastal Open Space Advisory Committee, and I don't know whether there's any requirement. I don't think there's any probably requirement to speak to. That's a fairly standard process. The committee is a management committee. They can make, I won't say decisions, but they can make recommendations to council, and council then needs to sign them off. And whilst I heard some comments today, I'm comfortable that we can sign things off and as from the experts that are on that committee, and if we have budget cover then for that, and it's been talked through in that context, then I'm quite comfortable to move that we will actually note those recommendations as the recommendations stay, and then I will resolve to adopt those resolutions as displayed on the screen. We'll move to item 2.10, which is the appointment of new committee members to some of the committee meetings. As I mentioned just a couple of papers ago, we had some committee meetings that didn't have quorums, so we've moved to try and appoint some new members. And the first one was we're appointing a new advisory committee member to the Pedestrian Access and Mobility Advisory Committee, and that is a Mr Nigel Tebb. So congratulations, Nigel, for getting on board that one. We've also added people to the Mangrove Mountain Committee, and I know Rod Dowman will love to be back on that committee and working hard with that. Ryan Howard and Ross Howard are the other two members of that committee. So we've appointed some new members to that committee. We've agreed to dissolve the Heritage and Cultural Advisory Committee as it exists, improve the formation of the Heritage Reference Group, and we're going to approve the dissolution of the Social Inclusion Advisory Committee with effect immediately. The sole remaining person on there's advice was that we do that, so it wasn't done in isolation. With those recommendations, I'm now going to agree to them and resolve to adopt the resolution as shown on the screen. The meeting record of the Protection of the Environment Trust Management Committee meeting, poet, etc. Again, I'm going to resolve to adopt those resolutions. Again, we're the trustees, the people have met, they've decided where the money should go. The money sits in our budget, it sits in the fund or the trust, if you like, and we approve the release and finally and let it go. So with that,
Did you want me to address the public forum?
yes, sorry. And of course, there were some comments raised at the public forum, which, yes, apologies. We'll get to address those as well. I couldn't. Is he here? No. Gone. He's watching online. Oh, great. So anyway, that's good. We can do it.
Thank you, Mr Administrator. In relation to Mr Snell's public forum, management of the Umina Coastal Sandplain Woodland is guided by the adopted 2007 Restoration and Rehabilitation Management Plan. An updated management schedule, works plan and costings were adopted by the Protection of the Environment Trust Management, or POET Committee, in July of 2021, and periodic reviews of the progress with implementation of the management plan are undertaken around about every 5 years, and I note we have members of the committee in the gallery tonight. Management of the Umina Coastal Sandplain Woodland was discussed in detail at the 15th of June meeting of this year. That meeting considered management plans for Scenic Road Bushland Reserve and Hillview Street Reserve, including amended budgets. However, the meeting did not resolve to refer proposed budget changes to Council at that time, which is required as the committee doesn't have the authority to make financial decisions on behalf of Council. So a formal resolution to refer proposed budget changes to Council was made at the 12th of December committee meeting, which results in the recommendation before Council tonight, and both the agenda and the minutes of all of those committee meetings are available on Council's website.
Thank you, and apologies, Mark, I couldn't see you there, so I didn't refer to you, but if you're listening online and watching online, hopefully you actually were able to hear that response from Dr. Howe. As I said, I think I've moved and approved those, but if I haven't, I'll move that recommendation to adopt those resolutions as shown on the screen. Item 2.12, which is the Unit Managed Position Strategic Planning and for Plant and Fleet. This is a mechanism to have the senior managers in this organisation placed on contracts, which are allowable still at the moment. That potentially might change under some current proposals. If that does happen, then of course that status will be changed. But the intention is to have, when people are on contract like this, it does give us a greater sense of, if you like, urgency to be able to get things done and to be able to work with people. So, look, I'm comfortable to support that approach, and therefore I'm happy to agree to the resolution displayed on the screen. And item 2.13, we have the Acting Director of Water and Sewer, Luke Welfare, which I think Luke's there, and he's going to talk to the Mardi Water Treatment Plant upgrade, which the Chief Executive referred to as future CapEx, which is going to come up. So would you like to take a little bit of a history through what this project's about and why it's so important for the community?
Thank you, Mr Administrator. Yes,
speak directly into the phone, that's good.
So this project's about upgrading the Mardi Water Treatment Plant to provide high quality drinking water to the community. It's to, into the future, and avoid more costly capital investments and allow us to treat the raw water that we're receiving from the community, from the environment, and treat blue-green algae, which the current plant is unable to do so. The project has been reviewed as part of the current IPART determination and is considered prudent, and the current water and sewer charges provide for the project. We can also advise Mr Administrator that we've received funding from the state government in the Safe and Secure Water program to approximately $6.8 million. And finally, to avoid some of the risks that the project has had, is that we're carrying out currently early contract investigations to reduce project risk and cost to the community. And it's anticipated if we're successful with those negotiations, we'll be able to award contract in the middle of the year, with the project planning to be completed in late 2025. Thank you.
Thank you. As both the two staff have mentioned, this is a very, very important project for the community into the future to, if you like, secure and maintain a very high standard for our potable or drinking water. I think one of the key things that just I would like to stress is the fact that when you go through the IPART process and IPART look to approve the rates that we can charge for both water and sewer, and they did drainage for the last year, that will cease in the future. But nonetheless, for water and sewer, when they look at it, IPART are very keen on the concept of intergenerational equity. And the way that's done mostly and largely is by, in fact, using debt as an instrument. So future generations are paying for work that is being done now. And that's why IPART actually encourage the use of debt. So when the IPART look at setting that fee and charge, and you take a large project like this, then they take into consideration in setting that fee, they make an allowance for the principal and interest to be incorporated, if you like, into that fee. So the total fee and charges takes that into account when they're setting it. And that's how they work right across the three water authorities, which is Sydney Water, Hunter Water and ourselves. So we are caught with that, and that's why it is a very good idea to borrow it. Now, the only concern I have, which is just a thought at this point in time, is that they're asking me to approve, and I will approve it, an interfund loan from the sewer fund. Now, I'm just a little bit reluctant. It's not really a real concern because it's probably the sensible thing to do. But I know that one of the problems with this particular council going back was in fact a concern about not understanding restricted, unrestricted monies and cross-funding, if you like, co-funding or funding across some of these entities. So to me, in the interest of complete transparency, I'd rather that was a commercial loan against water for that plant and it's clear and transparent, rather, if you like, taking money from the sewer fund, which is and does have a large surplus, I think about the order of 115 odd million, sitting in there in the reserve, borrow from that and then use it in water. Now, Hunter Water and Sydney Water do that, and they can do it interchange and they don't require ministerial consent. To do this in local government, you do require ministerial consent, and I'm just concerned that the idea of going through all that process and having it, if you like, intercompany borrowing, if you like, then there's just the risk that councillors and so on in the future may not fully understand things. So to me, it's just clearer. But having said that, it's absolutely probably the sensible thing to do financially, because we more than likely will get a better rate from ourselves than we would from the bank if we go to borrow it. But as I said, that's just something for the future for us to think about as we go forward. But in the meantime, I'm happy to approve the recommendations as they're shown on the screen and on the paper. The item 2.14, which the Chief Executive referred to, which was the investment report for December 2022, he's already covered that off, so I'm not going to spend any more time talking about it. It does show again and still does that very positive unrestricted cash position and a healthy balance there, which is good for the future. So with that, I'm going to resolve to adopt those resolutions as shown on the screen, and that is the last paper, I believe, for tonight. So with that, I'm going to close the meeting at 7:14 p.m. Now, I am going to have a cup of tea or coffee up the back there. I'm afraid there's only biscuits because we've been a little unsure about some of the attendees that have come in the past, I'll put it that way. So that's why you're getting tea and biscuits tonight. But nonetheless, we'll see what the future holds down the track. So you're welcome to join me up there for a cup of tea and biscuit.